Imagine a warship, built by the most powerful navy in the world, suddenly vanishing into thin air. Not destroyed, not sunk, just gone. And when it returned, the crew was no longer the same. Some were missing, some were driven insane, and some were fused into the metal of the ship itself. This isn't a movie. This is one of the most disturbing and controversial stories ever told in American military history. The story of what many believe was a secret experiment conducted by the U.S. Navy during World War II. An experiment that may have gone horribly wrong. In 1943, at the height of World War II, the United States was desperate for an advantage. The oceans were dangerous, filled with enemy submarines. Ships were being destroyed, supplies lost, and lives disappearing. Somewhere in this chaos, a radical idea was born. What if a ship could become invisible, not just hidden from the human eye, but completely undetectable, even by radar? The theory wasn't entirely science fiction. Scientists had been experimenting with electromagnetic fields, exploring ways to bend light and distort space around objects. If such a field could be generated around a warship, it could theoretically vanish from sight and from enemy detection systems. According to the story, the U.S. Navy selected a ship for this experiment, a destroyer escort known as the USS Eldridge. The plan was simple, but incredibly dangerous. Install powerful generators on the ship, surround it with a massive electromagnetic field, and then activate the system to see what happens. At first, there were smaller tests. Witnesses later claimed early trials were strange. The ship didn't disappear completely, but instead became surrounded by a strange greenish-blue glow. The air around it seemed to shimmer, as if reality itself was being distorted. Sailors nearby reported feeling dizzy, nauseous, disoriented. Some felt they were losing control, but despite these warning signs, the experiment continued. Then came the day that would change everything. The day of the full experiment. The USS Eldridge was docked in Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. Massive generators were activated. A powerful field began to build, and then something impossible happened. The ship started to disappear. Not slowly, not partially, completely. Eyewitnesses claimed that within moments, the USS Eldridge vanished entirely, leaving nothing behind but a strange, glowing mist. But that wasn't the end. Because at the same time, hundreds of miles away, in Norfolk, Virginia, sailors reported seeing something impossible. A warship suddenly appearing out of nowhere. The same ship, the USS Eldridge. For a brief moment it was there, visible, real, solid, and then it vanished again. Back in Philadelphia, the ship reappeared. But something was very wrong. The crew was not the same. Some sailors were screaming, others were completely silent, frozen in shock, and some were no longer alive. But the worst was yet to come. The most horrifying detail came from what witnesses claimed to see on the bodies of certain crew members. They were fused. To be continued. After the incident, it is said that the U.S. Navy immediately shut down the experiment. Records were sealed, witnesses were silenced, and any mention of the event was denied. Officially, the Philadelphia experiment never happened, but the story didn't die. Years later, strange letters began to surface. One of the most famous came from a man named Carlos Allende, who claimed to have witnessed the event. He described in detail how the ship vanished, how it reappeared, and what happened to the crew. His letters were sent to a researcher studying unexplained phenomena, and they quickly gained attention. Some believed him, others dismissed it as fiction. But the level of detail in his claims made people question everything. Could this have been real? Could the U.S. Navy have actually attempted something so dangerous, so far beyond human understanding? Or was it all just a story, exaggerated over time? Skeptics argue that there is no solid evidence, no official documents, no verified witnesses. They say the entire story is nothing more than a myth, a combination of misunderstandings, rumors, and imagination. But supporters of the theory point to something else. They say the absence of evidence is not proof of absence, especially when it comes to military secrets. During World War II, countless experiments were conducted in secrecy. Technologies were tested, ideas were explored, risks were taken. Some successful, some disastrous, and some never revealed. There are also strange connections made to real scientific theories. Some believe that the experiment was based on concepts related to Albert Einstein's unified field theory, an idea that aimed to combine all fundamental forces of nature into a single framework. If such a theory could be applied practically, it might allow control over gravity, electromagnetism, even space-time itself. But Einstein himself never confirmed any involvement, and no official link has ever been proven. Still, the mystery remains, because even today, decades later, people continue to debate what really happened. Was it a secret experiment gone wrong? A misunderstood scientific test? Or simply one of the greatest conspiracy theories ever created? The truth is, we may never know. But one thing is certain: if even a small part of this story is real, then what happened to the crew of the USS Eldridge is one of the most terrifying events in human history. And the idea that something like this could have been attempted should make us all wonder, what else might be hidden? To be continued in Part 3. But what if the story didn't end in Philadelphia? What if the experiment didn't just fail, but continued? As the years passed, more and more strange accounts began to surface. Not official reports, not government documents, but whispers, stories, fragments of something that refused to disappear. Some former sailors claimed that what happened to the USS Eldridge was not a one-time accident, but part of a larger project. A project that aimed to push the boundaries of reality itself. According to these claims, the goal was not just invisibility. It was something far more dangerous: teleportation. The idea that an object could disappear from one location and instantly reappear somewhere else. And if that sounds impossible, that's exactly why it was kept secret. Because if it worked, it would change warfare forever. No more travel time, no more distance. A ship could appear anywhere, at any moment. But if it went wrong, the consequences would be unimaginable. Some believe that during the experiment, the USS Eldridge didn't just become invisible. It actually left our dimension. For a brief moment, it slipped out of reality. And when it came back, not everything returned correctly. This could explain the most disturbing reports. The sailors fused into the ship. The men who lost their minds. The ones who vanished completely, as if their bodies couldn't fully reintegrate into the physical world. And then there are the stories that are even harder to explain. Stories of sailors who survived, but were never the same again. They were called the Lost Crew. According to certain accounts, these men experienced strange side effects long after the experiment ended. Some claimed they could turn invisible for short moments. Others said they would randomly disappear and then reappear, confused, terrified, and unable to explain what had happened. One particularly chilling story describes a sailor having dinner with his family. In the middle of the meal, he suddenly froze. His body became stiff. And then, slowly, he began to fade. Right in front of their eyes. Within seconds, he was gone. Forever. No flash, no sound, just gone. Imagine witnessing that. Imagine knowing that someone you love could simply disappear from existence without warning. These stories sound unbelievable, but they kept spreading, and with each retelling, they became harder to ignore. To be continued in Part 4. At the same time, researchers and conspiracy theorists began digging deeper. They started connecting dots, looking for any evidence that could prove or disprove the story. Some pointed to declassified military projects, real experiments involving electromagnetic fields, real attempts to manipulate radar visibility. And while none of these officially confirmed the Philadelphia experiment, they showed something important. The technology was not completely impossible. Others focused on inconsistencies. They argued that the USS Eldridge's official logs placed it nowhere near Philadelphia at the time of the supposed experiment, that the timeline didn't match, that the entire story was built on false assumptions. But then again, military records can be altered, details can be hidden, and during wartime, truth is often the first thing to disappear. There were also strange connections made to another infamous project, the Montauk Project, a supposed series of secret experiments conducted years later, involving mind control, time travel, and interdimensional research. Some believe that what happened in Philadelphia was just the beginning, that the experiment opened a door, and that door was never fully closed. But here's the part that makes this story truly unsettling, because whether you believe it or not, whether you think it's real or just a myth, the idea behind it is something humanity continues to explore. Even today, scientists are still studying ways to bend light, to make objects invisible, to manipulate space and time. Concepts that once sounded like science fiction are slowly becoming reality, and that raises a terrifying question. If we are already experimenting with these ideas now, then what might have been possible 80 years ago, behind closed doors, in total secrecy? The ocean keeps its secrets, and so does the military. The USS Eldridge still officially exists in records. Its history, its missions, its service. Everything looks normal, clean, ordinary. But if the stories are true, then somewhere in that timeline, something happened that was never meant to be known. Something that crossed a line between science and something far more dangerous. And maybe that's why the truth was buried, because some discoveries are not meant to be shared. Some experiments should never be repeated. And some mistakes are too terrifying to admit. So the next time you hear about a ship disappearing, or a strange experiment, or a story that sounds too impossible to be real, ask yourself one question. What if it is real? What if, just for a moment, the USS Eldridge truly vanished, and what came back was not the same ship, and not the same crew? Because if that's true, then the Philadelphia experiment was not just a failed test. It was a glimpse into something we were never supposed to see, and maybe something that is still out there, waiting. Thank you for watching.